The rays of early morning sunlight filtered through the tall pines surrounding Long Meadow Equine Sanctuary, casting golden shapes that swayed over scrub grass and dewy ground. Dr. Grace Camden strode through the arcing wooden gate, breathing in the crisp, hay-scented air. Her mind buzzed with the numerous tasks that filled her day vaccinations for the retired therapy horses, a checkup on a mare that had just given birth, and an extensive health evaluation for 3 rescue ponies. As a veterinarian who had recently moved her small practice to this peaceful patch of countryside, she thought she had seen every sort of equine malady. Yet, the moment she stepped onto the property, her senses told her something unusual was unfolding here. She had been called in the pre-dawn hours by Eliza Mulligan, who ran the sanctuary. Eliza's voice, usually calm and steady, had quivered with urgency. She explained that a stray horse, a beautiful but severely underweight stallion, had been found near the highway fence, grazing at a patch of scrubby grass. He had a pronounced limp and a gash on his rib cage. Eliza asked Grace to come as soon as possible. The vet walked over to the stables, scanning the rows of stalls for the stable manager, her stethoscope already dangling from her neck like a talisman of healing. It felt especially personal. Grace had grown up admiring horses and had become a veterinarian out of a deep love for them. Even so, her heart reeled with sadness at the thought of a horse limping in pain. She stepped into a dim stall that smelled faintly of antiseptic. Inside, the horse turned to face her. He was a tall chestnut stallion, his once glossy coat ragged from malnourishment, sweat. His eyes were haunted, but a trace of curiosity remained. Grace approached slowly, hands raised in a gentle gesture. The stallion's right foreleg was wrapped in a hasty bandage, red seeping through the gauze. He snorted, stepping back in fear, until he found himself cornered by the stall's low wall. Grace knelt down, speaking to him in a voice as steady as she could muster, letting him smell her hand. His ears swiveled, uncertain. She rummaged in her jacket pocket, extracting a sugar cube, and held it out. The horse's nostrils flared as he leaned forward, precariously shifting his weight. She waited, patient as the dawn light turned bright, until he took a hesitant bite. Eliza stepped in a moment later, relief shining behind her weary eyes. The rescue's best guess was that the horse belonged to someone who had abandoned him after a serious injury became apparent. Now that he was officially in the sanctuary's care, they could try to trace his real ownership. Grace was determined not just to close the raw wound, but to mend those shattered pieces of the horse's spirit that had likely resulted from ill treatment. She stood up and brushed the stable dust from her knees, making a mental note of his condition. He needed a thorough evaluation, but more than that, he needed consistent care and an experienced hand with rehabilitating traumatized horses. That was where her own abilities and the sanctuary's resources were essential. Still, the question nagged at her: where to begin? A few hours later, Grace carefully led the stallion into the open grooming area. Eliza disappeared for a few minutes, only to return with a tall man whose confident stride and gentle eyes suggested he had deep experience with horses. "Grace," Eliza said, "this is Ethan Brooks. He's an equestrian who's training a few of our rescues for riding programs. He's also volunteered to help with physical therapy for this new fellow." Grace turned, offered her hand. "Dr. Camden?" she introduced herself. Ethan dipped his head with an easy smile. "I know who you are, doctor," he said. "The horses speak highly of you." Though Ethan delivered his remark with a touch of humor, there was sincerity in his gaze. He approached the injured stallion carefully, letting the horse see him, smell him, and understand there was no threat. The newly christened horse Eliza had taken to calling him Phoenix for his potential to rise again stiffened at the contact, but Ethan's confident calm settled over them both. Grace observed how Ethan positioned himself, not cornering, not rushing. It reminded her of the deliberate way a breeze circulates in a canyon natural. Unforced. She liked it. With an approving nod, Grace said, "Thank you for helping me." Ethan only gave a modest shrug. "Horses have always been a part of my life. I can't stand idly by when one needs help." They started with palpations along Phoenix's flank to assess how deep the gash was. Grace confirmed that it looked worse than it was, though infection was beginning to set in. After disinfecting, she performed a few quick stitches. Phoenix whinnied, trembling at the sensations, but accepted the procedure more calmly than Grace had anticipated. His foreleg was more concerning. X-rays back at the clinic showed a hairline fracture. With rest, a proper splint, and a well-regulated exercise schedule, there was hope for full recovery. However, it wouldn't be quick or easy. "We'll need a place to keep him isolated from the other horses," Grace said, completing her final notes. "And he needs daily therapy once the bone heals enough to handle weight." Ethan folded his arms, meeting Grace's eyes. "The sanctuary is short on staff right now. If you want help with that, I'll be glad to volunteer." Thus began a partnership stronger than either of them realized. Each morning, Grace and Ethan met at sunrise to begin Phoenix's hydrotherapy long walks through a specially designed pool that helped the stallion exercise his injured foreleg. At first, Phoenix resisted the water. He refused to dip his hooves, pawing at the surface with frantic alarm. But with Ethan at the lead rope, gently coaxing the horse forward, as Grace offered soothing praise from the side, Phoenix learned to trust them. Day after day, they inched their way into deeper water. Soon the horse's muscles began to strengthen, his coat started to regain a slight shine, and his appetite improved. Grace found herself marveling at how readily Phoenix latched onto their care as a lifeline. It was as though, deep down, he believed in second chances. Between therapy sessions, Grace and Ethan fell into an easy rapport, talking about their life stories, their reasons for devoting themselves to horses, and their small personal dreams. She learned that Ethan had grown up on the outskirts of a ranch in Montana, where his parents had encouraged him to compete in show jumping. But a horrific accident during his teenage years left him with a shattered shoulder and nerves so rattled he gave up competing. Instead, he poured his soul into rehabilitating rescued horses. Drawing on his knowledge of equine behavior, "It changed everything," he explained one afternoon as they took a break by the paddocks, leaning against a fence as Phoenix contentedly munched from a nearby feed bin. "Getting back into the saddle after an accident can feel impossible. You feel like the ground wants to swallow you up. But then I saw this old mare that had been abused, half starved. Something about her desperation to trust again lit a fire in me, so I took a chance. Through helping her, I ended up healing too." Grace listened, her eyes lingering on the way the setting sun tinted his hair, the faint lines of past sorrow creasing his face. She found herself brimming with admiration and an unfamiliar warmth that she recognized as the stirring of deeper emotions. Grace, for her part, shared her own story in bits and pieces. She had managed to become a veterinarian despite financial hurdles, fueled by the memory of a pony she had adored as a child. That pony, Belle, had fallen ill when Grace was young, but a small-town veterinarian came to the rescue, and that moment cemented her life's calling. As the weeks passed, she found herself confiding more in Ethan, allowing him glimpses of the insecurities she hid behind a confident professional facade. The growing comfort between them seemed as effortless as breathing. One day, Grace arrived at the sanctuary drenched from a sudden downpour. Her hair plastered to her cheeks and her jacket dripping. She laughed as she peeled off her soggy gloves, grateful to see Ethan rushing out of the stable with a towel. He helped her dry off, his eyes crinkling at the corners as she blushed. Neither said much, but the exchange was as intimate as any whispered secret. Meanwhile, Phoenix was waiting in the paddock, impatiently stomping his good foreleg. The horse's ears perked up as soon as Grace and Ethan approached. They began the day's therapy, moving him slowly along a marked path to strengthen his gait. After a few smooth steps, Phoenix suddenly jerked to a stop, raising his lip in a grimace of pain. Grace and Ethan steadied him, letting him rest. Ethan turned to Grace. "He's exhausted," he said quietly. "We've been pushing him a bit too hard this past week, I think." Guilt tugged at Grace's heart. Every sign of discomfort from the horse felt like a personal failure. They carefully guided Phoenix back to his stall, removing the splint to apply the ointment for inflammation. Grace's brow furrowed as she examined the leg. The hairline fracture was knitting together, but the surrounding muscle was still tender. We'll give him a couple of restful days, she decided. Light exercise only, maybe just gentle walking. We can't risk re injury. The days of rest proved to be a blessing in disguise for Phoenix and for Grace and Ethan. With no challenging therapy sessions to concentrate on, they had time to simply be with the horse. They groomed him with slow, steady strokes of the brush, letting him savor gentle companionship without demands. Phoenix rewarded them with contented sighs, his body visibly less tense than it had been. In these calm moments, Grace felt an emotional closeness forming not just with the stallion, but with Ethan as well. There was something about caring for an animal in distress that brought out one's truest self. She realized Ethan brought out a side of her she rarely let others see, tender, nurturing, and unguarded. One balmy afternoon, they led Phoenix into a small pasture where the grass was lush. The stallion walked carefully, but with no trace of that haunting limp. As he lowered his head to graze, Ethan and Grace sat atop a split rail fence. Flecks of sunlight fanned across their shoulders. For a long while, they watched Phoenix nose the greenery, occasionally flicking an ear in their direction. When the stallion wandered a bit farther, Ethan leaned closer to Grace. "You know," he said, "watching this horse heal, it's helping me too." She turned her head, curiosity and affection bright in her gaze. "How so?" A soft humor colored his smile. "He had a broken leg. I had a broken heart." Grace's cheeks warmed. She was used to taking charge, diagnosing problems, offering solutions, but in this moment, she felt open, as though the entire range of human emotion lay before her, unmasked. "It is healing," she said quietly, "seeing him trust us after whatever he's been through. It reminds me that we can move forward from our hurts if we have someone patient standing by us." Their eyes locked. The day had turned sweet with possibility. Ethan's breath caught, and for the briefest moment, Grace wondered if she would feel his lips brush against hers. But Phoenix snorted, snapping them both back to reality. They parted with a breathless laugh. Cheeks flushed. More days passed, and Phoenix's rehabilitation reached a milestone. His foreleg was strong enough for light riding. The idea at first seemed unthinkable, but the sanctuary's trainer, who'd watched them work, insisted that a short, bareback session could help Phoenix relearn proper balance. Ethan was the logical choice to be the first rider, given his equestrian background. When the moment arrived, Grace stood in the ring, her heart hammering as she watched him mount the stallion gently, mindful of every muscle twitch, every shift in the horse's posture. Phoenix stumbled at first, but quickly found his stride, as though remembering a time when life hadn't been marked by pain. In a wide circle around the ring, Ethan guided him at a controlled walk. Grace's pulse raced, uncertain whether to feel pride or terror. If Phoenix faltered, the setback could be catastrophic. But the stallion did not falter. With each lap, Grace marveled at the connection between horse and rider, so close they seemed to breathe in sync. Ethan dismounted after a few minutes, exhaling a triumphant breath. Phoenix pawed the ground contentedly, nickering in approval. Grace rushed to them, beaming. "That was incredible," she exclaimed, placing a hand on the horse's flank, then looking up into Ethan's eyes. The next thing she knew, Ethan's arms were around her in an impulsive, jubilant hug. It was warm and strong and said more than words could manage. She felt her own arms circle his waist, her heart swelling with gratitude. Night settled in and the sanctuary's workers filtered out. Only Grace and Ethan remained, shoulders pressed together as they walked Phoenix back to his stall. The moon's soft light sparkled on the dew across the paddock. They unbuckled the stallion's halter, letting him settle in with fresh bedding and a full trough. "Good night, Phoenix," Ethan murmured, stroking the horse's neck. Grace ran her hand along the white blaze on Phoenix's face, whispering gentle words of praise. The horse gave a lazy blink and a quiet snort, contented. In the hum of that peaceful moment, Ethan turned to Grace. "Walk with me a bit?" he asked. She nodded, and they stepped outside the barn into moonlight that glimmered off the wooden fences and rolling fields. The wind carried the scent of mown hay. Time seemed to slow as they found themselves strolling side by side along a gravel path, the crunch of stones underfoot the only sound. Grace didn't need him to speak to know something important hung between them. She felt it in the air, in the lines of tension and hope in his posture. Finally, Ethan spoke quietly. "Meeting you has been so unexpected," he said, voice low. "I came to do volunteer work with these rescue horses. I never expected," he paused, searching her eyes. "I never expected to feel this way again." Grace felt her pulse beat harder, her cheeks flush in the silver moonlight. "I know," she replied. "Me neither. It's like we spoke through Phoenix without even trying." He slid his hand into hers, a gesture so natural that she hardly registered it had happened until she felt his fingers interlaced with hers. "You're healing him in ways I can't fully explain," Ethan whispered. "And you're healing me, too." His gaze flicked from her eyes to her lips, but he hesitated, as though uncertain whether a first kiss under these circumstances was too soon or too personal. Grace decided for him. She squeezed his hand, closed her eyes, and tilted her face upward. Their lips brushed softly, a delicate, tender kiss that whispered of new beginnings. When they pulled apart, she felt as though the warmth of that moment would carry her through any darkness that might lie ahead. In the weeks that followed, the sanctuary bustled with renewed life. The staff had new energy, spurred on by Phoenix's steady recovery. Grace and Ethan continued to work side by side. True to their word, they traced ownership records and discovered that Phoenix was originally from a farm several counties away, one that had shut down under questionable management. A local judge declared that the horse's original owners waived their rights by abandoning him. The official paperwork needed to finalize the transfer of ownership to the sanctuary was underway, but there was little doubt Phoenix had found his permanent home. Meanwhile, Grace's relationship with Ethan deepened in gentle increments. Some days it meant sharing coffee after a particularly grueling therapy session, quietly discussing their concerns and ambitions. Other days it meant just being silent together, each lost in the unspoken gratitude that they had found an ally in the other. At night, Ethan occasionally lingered in Grace's truck, leaning in for a quick goodnight kiss that left them both smiling all the way home. As Phoenix grew stronger, the question of his eventual role at the sanctuary arose. Could he be retrained as a riding horse for therapy programs, or was it too risky, given his history? Grace and Ethan evaluated him carefully, eventually experimenting with short rides that gradually included gentle trots. Phoenix proved eager and cooperative, as though he welcomed the chance to prove he wasn't broken. Eliza, the sanctuary manager, beamed as she watched him carry children at a walk around the ring. The kids laughed excitedly while Phoenix pricked his ears, stepping carefully, proud yet calm, a testament to patient rehabilitation. On a bright summer afternoon, kids and parents gathered around the ring for a demonstration of some of the sanctuary horses. This time, Grace was the one perched on Phoenix's back, while Ethan stood ready on the ground, lead rope in hand. Grace guided the stallion at a controlled walk around the ring. Applause rippled through the small crowd. When the demonstration finished, she and Phoenix walked over to a group of children so they could pat the horse's nose. The stallion received them unruffled. She carefully dismounted, and Ethan took her place at Phoenix's side, holding him steady for the next child to sit on for a moment. Grace wiped a bit of sweat from her brow, feeling a rush of pride, reinforcing Phoenix's trust. With each small success felt like healing something within her own heart as well. When the event ended, Grace and Ethan retired to a small tack room, dusty from the day's activities. She poured them each a glass of lemonade and they sat on a pair of battered stools that had seen better days. As they drank, Ethan placed his hand on her knee, eyes shining. "Sometime," he said, voice filled with awe, "I think about how Phoenix almost never got this chance. If he'd been left on the road for another day or two, who knows what might have happened?" Grace felt her throat tighten. "I know," she said. "It feels like a miracle that we found him in time." Ethan's voice slipped to a murmur, "And we found each other." His quiet words hung in the small space. Grace reached up and brushed her fingertips along his shoulder. She had no witty reply, only a surge of gratitude. Outside, the hum of the day went on. Children laughing, parents chatting, horses whinnying in the distance. But in that tack room, she and Ethan were alone in a world that had finally aligned in their favor. Time rolled forward, and the sanctuary prepared to officially celebrate Phoenix as a permanent part of their therapy program. Flyers and social media posts announced a small ceremony with a ribbon cutting of a new paddock designated for rehabilitated horses. Eliza asked Grace if she would do the honors, and Grace, in turn, insisted that Ethan be up there with her. After all, his volunteer work and unwavering passion were integral to Phoenix's transformation. The day dawned sunny, and the air buzzed with excitement. A local journalist came to cover the event, snapping pictures of the proud stallion trotting in his new paddock, wearing a decorative halter with braided ribbons. Children placed hand-painted signs around the fence posts, proclaiming their love for Phoenix the Brave. Grace felt a tremor of emotion build behind her eyes as she took the microphone. "Thank you all for joining us," she began. "Phoenix's story is more than just a rescue. It's a testament to the heights we can reach with compassion and determination." She thanked the sanctuary team, the donors, the volunteers. Then she paused, beckoning Ethan to step forward. He did, leaning toward the microphone. "And let's not forget the true hero here," he said. "Dr. Camden, who patched him up, soothed his fears, and believed in him every step of the way." Laughter and applause broke out, though Grace felt her cheeks warming. When it came time to cut the ribbon, Grace and Ethan did so together, both placing a hand on the scissors, just as they had both placed their hands on Phoenix's reins so many times before. The wide ribbon fluttered to the grass, and the crowd cheered. Grace felt a small surge of pride as Phoenix nickered from his new paddock, as if he understood. Then, in front of everyone, Ethan turned to Grace and reached for her hand. His voice was steady but thick with sentiment. "I don't want to ever let go of what we've built together," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. The shared emotion between them was electric. Grace squeezed his hand in response, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. In the days after the ceremony, life at the sanctuary slipped into a peaceful routine, with Phoenix settled into his daily tasks as though he'd always belonged there. It seemed the horse had found not just a physical home, but an emotional one, shared by everyone who had poured their care into him. As the barn lights flicked off each evening, Grace would lean her head on Ethan's shoulder, lulled by the hushed niggers of dozing horses and the rhythmic chirping of crickets outside. One particular evening, they stayed late to finish tidying up. After checking on Phoenix, the two of them found themselves alone under the clear night sky. The smell of summer grass enveloped them. Grace felt a flutter of nervous excitement as Ethan led her behind the stable, where the gentle slope of a nearby hill offered a view of starlit fields. They sat down, side by side, on the blanket of soft grass. He draped an arm around her shoulder. She let her head rest against his chest. For a moment, they watched the glittering constellations dance overhead, hearts beating in quiet harmony. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "I've never felt such a sense of belonging. Not just to a place, but to a person." He kissed the top of her head softly. Grace turned her face upward. "Neither have I," she whispered. "I've been so focused on my career and the welfare of the animals that I never let myself be open to this." She reached for his hand, her thumb brushing over his knuckles in a gentle caress. "I'm so glad I did." A tender hush fell over them, a hush that said more than any vow. They had chosen each other, just as Phoenix had chosen to trust them. The world outside might be uncertain, but in this patch of land, their hearts were secure. They sat that way for a long time, letting the night air wash over them. In that space, beneath the quiet shimmer of stars, Grace felt certain of a single truth. Healing came in many forms, stitching wounds, rebuilding muscles, offering hope. But there was a strand of healing that only love could provide, binding together two souls who understood the value of care. She felt it in Ethan's heartbeat, in the memory of the first day she met Phoenix, in the way the horse had slowly, painstakingly moved from terror to trust. This was the love story beneath the bridle, the one that continued each time they tended a new horse or simply shared a silent moment in the stable. Months from now, people might see Phoenix in the ring, guiding a timid rider who needed confidence. They'd see Grace calmly checking the horse's vitals, ensuring there remained no sign of injury. They'd see Ethan, ready with a steady hand. What they might not see, at least not directly, was the tapestry of devotion that wove them all together. It was present in every whisper of encouragement to the horse, and every affectionate glance exchanged between Grace and Ethan. In that unspoken tapestry, trust had slipped its reins, forging a bond stronger than steel. And it was that bond, born of compassion, nurtured by patience, and completed by love, that would guide them all forward